Hello. How are we doing? All right? Yeah, cool. So, thanks for staying around this afternoon. Thanks for coming along, and big thanks to all the organisers for making what's been so far a really amazing event. So, I'm going to share with you some practical and inventive ways of pinching keyword insights from your competitors. That's a lie. In fact, I'm going to share 6, so that's a bit of a bonus. They're pretty hacky, but I hope you'll find them useful. So, Jen did a great introduction. Who am I? My name's Kelvin Newman. I'm the founder of BrightonSEO. You might know it. If you don't, it started out as a couple of dozen people meeting in an upstairs room of a pub. It's now attended by over 4,000 people from 40 different countries. So we think it's the biggest search marketing event in the world. Certainly, we like to say it is in our marketing materials. But I've got a confession to make. I'm not actually from Brighton. I'm very associated with Brighton. I don't even live in Brighton. I'm from Worthing. Does anyone know Worthing? It's famous for one thing, basically, which is where people jump off the end of the pier. They don't do that anymore. Health and safety gone mad. So what am I going to be talking about today? Well, I'm going to start off by telling you what this presentation isn't about. So it's not like, here's how you use Keyword Planner, and it'll give you some excellent keywords. It's not, here's how to use the blockchain and AI to invent ways of doing keyword research. It's some kind of nice, practical ways that aren't rocket science, that aren't crazy, but I hope will either be new to you, new ways of thinking of coming up with some keyword ideas that you can target, or if they're not new, they might at least reinforce that you're doing it in an interesting way. So let's get stuck into it. So I think one of the biggest mistakes that it's easy to make, and it's a trite suggestion to sort of put out there, is that you should just write for your users, and that'll mean that you cover your keywords. I think that's poor advice. Now, if you've got an exceptionally good understanding of your market, you've got an exceptionally good understanding of your product, and you're an incredibly naturally gifted writer, you might just be able to write content that's going to do very, very well in the search engines. But for the rest of us, I think we'd be much better if we understand not only our users, but what our competitors are doing. And I think there's a lot of insight we can gain using these methods that I'm going to take you through here that help us understand the words, the phrases, the style of language that we ought to use based upon our competitors. So I think there's been a bit of a shift. There's certainly a shift in how I think about keyword research now compared to a few years ago. And I think it's a change from the process in the past might have been to optimize a page. You'd take the keywords you were targeting and you'd put them in the places, right? You'd put them in the title tag, you put them in the body copy, all of that type of thing. Now, I think there's a change now and in how I optimize pages, but I also think in how the search engines understand pages, is that it's in a context, right? So for a search query, there are other pages that rank, right? And I think that you need to understand the content of those other pages to genuinely do a really good job of ranking. So I think there's a bit of a change, right? So I think the old model would be, is the search query on the page? Does the page deserve to rank, right? You get those 2 ticks right, you're going to be okay. Whereas I think it's a bit subtle, but I think there's a change. So I think, does it contain the search query is still a pretty big, important question. But does it also contain the words and phrases, the terminology that other pages that also rank for that term contain as well? And does it deserve to rank? So I'm going to show you a way of doing that. As an aside, this is one I have to kind of remind myself to do, but I think it's really important. I try to always refer to them as search queries rather than keywords or key phrases. And I think that's really an important sort of psychological thing I try to do, is because it reminds you that ultimately, when someone's going to the search box, talking into, Alexa, whatever it is where they're, having that search behavior, really they're asking a question, right? It might not be formed as a question, but they're saying, I want to learn about, I want to find out about, all of those types of things. It's really a question, so try and think of them as search queries. So here's some hacky, clunky ways of seeing those words or phrases that I think you should include, right? So here's my first method. Okay, so you take the top 10 search results. So you take your query, I don't know, it's for Leeds hotels. You choose the top 10 results that are there, and you extract the text from those pages. You can do that in a variety of different ways. I quite like using a tool called Textize. It's free. So that gives you a page like this. So we've got a page of The Guardian there talking about 3D printed houses, and it turns it into this, right? A plain text version. If you're on your iPhone, it's very similar to the kind of view you get when you press to see the text version. So we now have the fundamental text, which the search engines are using to determine whether that page should rank. We've now got a copy of that. So we take those 10, and we bunk them into a word cloud tool, right? All 10, all of the copy from all of those 10 pages. There's dozens of word clouds out there you'll all be very familiar with, and this isn't something new to you, but if you put all of those websites in there, and that then gives you something like this, right? So this was for PCP cars, which is kind of a finance product, personal contract purchase when you're buying a car. And as you'd expect, words like finance, credits, payment, all in there, they would inevitably be in your copy anyway. It'd be very hard to write about that topic in an appropriate way and not do them. But there's others that then start to appear in there that are perhaps less likely to appear, particularly if you don't know the sector, which is often the case if you're working in an agency and you're working on a finance client one minute and an e-commerce client the next. So I'm looking for phrase and terminology and jargon like GMFV, right, which is the guaranteed value that they pay for the car at the end of the period of you doing the PCP purchase. I would think a good article about PCP that didn't have that acronym in it would probably not be a very good article on that topic because it doesn't talk about those particular things as well. We're looking for words like dealers. We're looking at tax implications as well. If you're not talking about that, that's you're there. So that's a 10-minute job. Very, very quick to do. I don't think in many cases it's going to bring 70, 80, 90, 99% of these words you'll already have been considering. But what I want are the ones that are the gaps there. So you're really treating it a bit like bingo, really, at that stage. So this is my second method. Similar, but slightly different. So here, you take the top 2 results for your search query and your own website. So it's essentially the same as the first step of the one I just talked about as well. Again, you use Textize to get the text that's there. You then do a step which is kind of essentially to try and find all the single words, right? So I want to be able to find all of the words and sort of how frequently they're all used, and the top ones will be like the, how, all of those types of things. There's a quite nice tool called Write Words, again, completely free, like a web tool, that will give me an output something a bit like this, right? So again, similar search query to the ones we were doing previously. So 73 instances on one of these pages of the word the. That's not very helpful to you. That's not what we're trying to find here. But instead, we're interested in effectively what's the second column. You might get some interesting things about the frequency here, but probably not. Instead, what I want is a list of all of the words or phrases that are used on that page. Right? So I do that for each of those different websites. I get 3 different versions of these lists, and I do a Venn diagram of them. Right? Now, this isn't a proper, genuinely, so I'll show you, is Venny, again, a free web tool, that puts the words of each of those 3 different websites in there and generates a Venn diagram. So I'm then able to sort of click on each of these different sections, and it highlights the overlaps. So I'm particularly interested, so say I'm one of these websites, I'm really interested in the overlap where both of my competitors are using these words or phrases, and I'm not. There might be a particular reason why that's the case, but I think it's good to do these types of understanding. You can do it for more than 3 websites, but it starts, if you've ever seen like a 6 overlap Venn diagram, it's a bit trippy. But I think that's a good approach to take. So I'm really interested in the topics, and this is at a granular word level, but you'll often find it'll be sections you could add to your copy to do well. So my third method. So here you take a key ranking page of a competitor, you do the Textize thing as we've just done. This one's really hacky, but it does bring some interesting ones. So we're going to use Textize, take the text, put it in a Word document, or any generic file along those means. And then go to Google Translate, right? And I'll go to Google Translate, get that. You need to do the whole document because the default interface on Google Translate only does like a couple of paragraphs. So I want to go and translate into French. That'll give me something like this. So I've done a guide on insulating your home. That's in French. That's not that helpful to me, unless I'm targeting France as a country. And then I'll maybe go from French to Spanish, and then Spanish back to English, right? And what I've got then is something where there are some quite subtle differences between them. It's really quite interesting in a weird sort of, if you're interested in words, which if you're interested in search, you probably are, where you end up here. So we've got the original version. Said you can always tell who hasn't insulated their loft because of the pigeons and seagulls sitting on their roof. We get this a lot down in Brighton. Enjoying the warmth coming up from the house. Heat rises and those wily birds are quick to take advantage. And then we've got the multiple translations we get through, and we end up with a version there. Very similar, but a couple of words different. But we're looking for words or phrases or ideas or concepts that end up in this additional version that weren't there, because this is an additional way of generating ideas that isn't Keyword Planner, right? Because we all use the same tools. We're trying to find the potential topics we've got there as well. So in that process, taking that document about insulation of houses, I then found, because of the translation, it was talking about townhouses, right? Again, maybe not necessarily super high volume, but it's one that's there that's an opportunity. The translated version referenced insulating panels, which is a product you can buy. It has search volume, is a product that people sell. Wasn't used in the original article. Might not have been suggested when we use Keyword Planner. So again, hacky, but it gives you a different way of coming up with a couple of extra ideas to throw into the pot. My fourth method. Now, image search has changed its interface quite a lot. And I'm not necessarily familiar with how it's being described, but I kind of think of it as these revised queries. So I'll show you screenshots here. You'll be an aside. So you will probably already do some variation of this, right? So if you're looking to generate keyword ideas, you might use like the related searches as a way of generating keyword ideas. You might even use a tool to do that. My plea to you, don't use Ubersuggest because you've encouraged Neil Patel. Use Answer the Public, which is much better. But if you take a search query and go to image search, you get this, right? We're probably all familiar with this type of result. But these are really great suggestions that weren't there. I showed you the previous screen, the ones that were showing the text-based versions. But here we've got the variations. So we've got, I search for Sussex wedding venues. I've got rustic wedding, outdoor wedding, beach wedding, luxury, unique, bohemian. Bohemian wedding isn't one that necessarily I think would immediately come up when I go to the Keyword Planner tool. And it's worth going a few layers deep, right? So if I click on one of those, little coloured buttons we get there, I clicked on the beach wedding one, I then get additional suggestions. Now, these are quite geographically located, which is going to be tricky to change where your wedding venue is located, but you will see these descriptions, these adjectives that people are using that are based on behaviour that people have interest to find this out. Even if you don't think of your product as being a visual search one, you'd be surprised how informative and imaginative this can be. I also really like it as well because the colours are sort of implying some categorization in how the search engine, in this case Google, how they are categorizing the types of search queries that people are making, right? Because if we look here, let's take this across, and we've roughly got here, so we've got A-line, which is a bit of a misname here, so lacy and lace, that's a material. So even if I could add lace as a keyword that I'm targeting in my paid search campaign, but what's more interesting to me is that's identifying, there are adjectives based on material. What other materials are there that I could then add as my keyword? We've then got these, what I've described as adjectives here, so elegant, sweetheart, mermaid. We've got a branded one in there. We've got the style. We've got the context, right? So a wedding dress for an outdoor wedding, for a rustic wedding, for a garden wedding. So here you've got the straightforward suggestion of here's a new keyword you add that the one's there. But actually what I think the most value is in then kind of going, so what outdoor wedding is a type of wedding, so I'm now doing wedding dresses for all of those types of wedding. Which brings me to adjective order. I've not really heard this talked about at an SEO conference, but it is kind of weird how familiar this will be to you. You may have seen this viral tweet that went round. So this is things native English speakers know. but we don't know that we know, right? So I'll read you here. So adjectives in English absolutely have to be in this order: opinion, size, age, shape, colour, origin, material, purpose, then the noun, right? So you can have a lovely little old rectangular green French silver whittling knife, but if you mess with that word order in the slightest way, you'll sound like a maniac, right? So it's an odd thing that every English speaker uses this list, but none of us could ever articulate it, right? So that's why you don't get green grape dragons. Now, it's really interesting that, this is instinctive, but I could never articulate to you what that order is. But it's quite interesting, because when you start to look into these things, if you're trying to learn English as a foreign language, you've got to get your head around that, right? So there's lots of English language resources that show you this default order that we tend to go through. So they say opinion, size, physical quality, age, shape, colour, origin, material, and purpose, in that order. And this will only become more apparent, I think, in voice search, because as we are speaking to the device. I think voice search is a little overstated. It's been said a lot today that it's overstated. But I think that this word order adjective is really interesting. And Pinterest do something quite similar here as well. So glass garage doors, not the sexiest of topics. But if I search glass garage doors there, in Pinterest, I'm again getting these adjectives, these concepts, these ideas of ways of doing that. So Pinterest is a very good source here of doing that as well. So this is my fifth method. This is a Pinterest one as well. Now, Pinterest search results typically don't have very many words on them, the search results page like the one we just had. But you'd be surprised, there's a small number of words that are there are particularly adjective rich, right? So they're the kind of keywords that people use to refine their topics. So you take a Pinterest search result, just cut and paste all the text out of it, put it into a word cloud. This was the one we just had there. And suddenly you've got these ideas, right? We've got things about heights in millimeters. We've got renovation, right? So the best one's there. We've got my name, because that was on the Pinterest page as well. But, there are other ideas that are coming through here. There's carriage. There's colours, obviously. That would not be one that's surprising to you. But doing this a few times, the ones like inspo, as in for inspiration, is used quite a lot. There are people using these terms. So, again, ideas. Muse is in there as well. This is my sixth one. Super quick, but I think is quite powerful as well. Take the Twitter feed, word cloud it, right? Of your competitor, you do that, you suddenly get all the things they're talking about. So this is PreziBox, a few of you might know Zach. And again, we're immediately given the types of things that they're talking about, right? The topics that they should be doing. It takes 2 seconds, it's quite powerful. So I want to finish up, though, on a sort of general lesson about keyword research. I hope these methods I've shared with you are something you can try, right? They might give you a tiny advantage and maybe a way of making your process a little bit more inventive. But it's useful to remember that, particularly if you're working brand side, but also if you're working for an agency, there is this curse of knowledge. It's a well-known cognitive bias that occurs when an individual is communicating with other individuals and they assume that you know as much as you do. Keyword research, you must fight this cognitive bias. The more you know about your product, in many ways, the worse that makes you about keyword research in certain circumstances. Because if you know how to describe it, then you're in a different place to the people who are searching for it. And to be a better SEO, often you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You just need to do a few things a little bit better than you used to. And I hope I've shared a couple of ones that might allow you to do that. Thank you very much.
Turn the music up in the headphones.